I want to welcome you back to Thrive in the Word. We've been talking about how we are supposed to witness to other people, how we're supposed to give an account for the hope that's within us. And now in verse number 18, we see the attitude that Jesus had towards unbelievers. Now we've talked about how we need to sanctify or consecrate Christ as Lord in our hearts. In other words, that we need to be dedicated or committed to living a life in which Jesus is Lord, and how that as we live that life, people are going to see the hope that's within us. And then we talked about how we need to witness with gentleness and with reverence. And Peter continues that teaching on how we are to be witnesses, what we need to be doing. And he gets to verse number 18. And sometimes if you look at this out of context, you're thinking, this really doesn't fit. But it fits when you understand the context of what he's talking about. He is telling us how Jesus came to this world and how he treated the unbelievers. And this is what he says, verse number 18, 1 Peter, 3rd chapter, verse number 18. For Christ also died for sins once for all. What did he say? That Jesus came, and the way that he treated sinners was he died for them. He gave his life, not for a bunch of righteous people. In fact, Jesus said, I didn't come for those who are just. I didn't come for the righteous. I came for the unrighteous. Now, how many of you realize everybody that he was talking to was unrighteous? But you see, the thing that Peter's trying to get across to us is that this was Jesus's attitude. He came and he gave his life for the sinners. You know what? We as believers need to take this to heart. That we need to give of ourselves to the unrighteous. That we need to bow down and minister to them. Many years ago, I was in the country of Bangladesh. And I wasn't supposed to be there. It was against the law to preach the gospel in Bangladesh, but I was there. I was actually teaching in a Bible school that was on an island. And I really can't give you all the details because it could be dangerous to the believers that are there. But on the way back from this Bible school, we were traveling, and I'm in the back of a van. Now, how many of you can take one look at me and say, well, Leon, you don't look like a Bengali person? So I was in the back of the van. The curtains were pulled, and I was kind of in hiding, I guess. And the van driver, who was an unbeliever, but we paid him enough to keep quiet, got in a fight with another person. It was road rage. And you know what happened? The police were called. And there was a time there where the man who was the believer that had invited me to Bangladesh, he would come in and he'd say, Brother Leon, you need to pray. You need to pray. And I remember peeking out of the curtain and watching this believer and watching how he was ministering and how he was speaking to this very violent Muslim man. And this Muslim man, he was out for blood. And I remember one of the most astonishing things I've ever seen. I saw this believer fall down on his knees, pick up the foot of that unbelieving Muslim man who was so violent and kissing that foot. It was dirty. They didn't wear shoes, and it was a dirty foot. But you know what? Instantly, that man's life changed. And you know what? I believe to this day that I'm sitting here in this studio because of the meekness and the way that that believer approached that sinner. It was a lesson to me. You know, we need to approach the unbelievers, the sinners, the way that Jesus did. And how did Jesus approach the sinner? He approached the sinner by giving his life for their sins. And then it says, at the just for the unjust. Just think about that. Here is Jesus. He is completely just. He's the only one who's ever walked the face of this earth that had no sin. He was completely just. He was completely right. But yet he came and he gave his life for those who weren't right, for those who were unjust. Jesus came with that type of attitude. And you know what? It was his attitude towards the unrighteous that has changed the world. Now, going back to verse number 18, and he says it, this is the reason why he came, so that he might bring us to God. Here is a person completely unjust, completely unrighteous. If that person were to enter into the presence of God, he would be consumed immediately with fire. But Jesus comes and he dies so that that person could have a relationship with God, so that person could enter in. You know, this morning I've entered in already into the presence of God. Why? Because I'm so good? Because I'm a preacher and teacher of the Word of God? No. No. It's because Jesus came and he died for me. And you see, we as believers, we need to have that same attitude that Jesus had. We need to go to people with the idea of bringing them into a relationship with God the Father. Not an idea of, here I am, look at me and look at you. You are the scum of the earth. No, those ideas and those ways of approaching an unbeliever are just not going to be effective. Now, I believe that you can scare somebody into making a decision, but you can't scare them into a relationship. You know, if I were to introduce you to a friend of mine that you've never met, and if I were to say to you, now this is my friend and he hates you, and he wants to beat you up, and he doesn't even want to be in your presence. He does not even like you. How many of you would say, Leon, what in the world are you doing? But you know what? That's the way many believers treat the unbeliever. They say, here's God, and he hates you. He hates your sin. You're going to hell. And you know what? That's true. But that's not the way we approach, and that is not the way Jesus approached us. Going back to the end of verse number 18. To bring us to God, having put to death in the flesh and been made alive in the Spirit. Jesus was put to death in the flesh for you and for me. But then the result of that was that he was made alive in the Spirit. You know, when we approach people the way Jesus approaches us, you know what's going to happen? They're going to see the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. But they're going to see the outcome, that they can be alive, that their lives can be changed by the power of God, that their lives would be changed by the preaching of the gospel. I hope this has blessed you today. Now, until we speak to you again, may God bless you abundantly.